What's up, everybody? Today we are having another session of Behind Software, and I have a legendary guest, Alberto Brandolini. He is a software designer known for creating event storming, a simple method to explore and improve complex business processes. His work focuses on making teamwork and problem-solving cleaner and more collaborative. Today with him, we are planning to talk about event storming, domain-driven design, modern software development, and of course, collaborative modeling. So thank you very much for accepting my invitation. And today I have a lot of interesting questions for you about domain-driven design, about event storming, about modern software development. So if you don't mind, I want to start with my questions.
Let's go.
Cool. So first of all, of course, I have a lot of questions regarding to event storming. Could you please explain event storming in simple terms for those who might be new to the concept?
Well, event storming is let's say a family of workshops. It started like one, but then we started splitting and finding different recipes. It's based on the ideas from collaborative modeling, even if the term was not yet popular at that time. And it's centered on exploring complex domain, starting with the key events, the things that happen in a given place. And there are two main directions to go into. One direction might be discovery, and this is where the big picture event storming format shines. And this is a format where you might have like 20, 30 people in the same room, building a map of everything that happens in a business line, and then progressively inject some discipline, structure, clarity, rewriting, and so on in what gets into an act of collective understanding. Oh, this is the reason why you're doing this, and then I need this to do this, and then the whole process get reshaped along the way. This usually takes like one day, a lot of involvement, a lot of discoveries, and it's actually fun. When we get into design, we still use a similar grammar, actually just a variation on that, but then it's an act of collaborative design instead. And so we use the grammar as a way to shape the conversation, but we need to make sure that the business processes we are designing or the software which is supporting these business processes is sound and well structured, and all the key decisions in the flow are well placed. So it's the same perspective. Part of the grammar, part of the language is actually the same, and this helps seeing the whole landscape of the business domain or the specific process that we are modeling, but it could really serve many different purposes. And in some scenarios, we are just using, we're just morphing from one format to another one because, okay, now discovery is over. Let's just start designing the best process for this scenario. So it's quite a few things from discovery to design involving many people.
That's great. That's great. So what inspired you to create event storming? So what you see the problem and you started to work on event storming?
It was actually happening in another way. So the first time we got into something didn't really have a name was actually a little meetup that happened in Italy. 14 years ago, probably, and we were supposed to give different modeling solutions to a problem that one of my colleagues had in this consulting activity. And we had quite a few whiteboards in the room, but not as many as we wanted. At that time, I used to travel with an IKEA paper roll in my backpack because my starting point was I need modeling surfaces. I am not guaranteed to have one where I'm working. Maybe whiteboards are not always available. Meeting rooms are not always accessible, but I need to model like oxygen. And so I had my paperboard. And while I left everybody the whiteboard, I said, like, okay, I can use my paper roll for my process. And then I started putting stickies in different colors according to the different role the wannabe classes had in the tentative model. And then I modeled, something in, let's say, 10 minutes. And then I looked around and everybody else was, what the hell are you doing? Well, I completed my prototype. What did you do? And I saw 4 empty whiteboards. Oh, you got nothing. And I have a prototype. I think I win this round.
Great.
So that was the idea. There was not a deliberate choice like there's a problem and I can solve it with this one. I was playing with things. I was breaking some rules. I was doing something unexpected, like traveling with the paper roll. Like every advice I get was, well, you have to travel light. Well, I was doing the opposite. And I was carrying a lot of sticky notes with me, but because I needed this thing. The other principle was I needed feedback. Like I can do a decent, good design at the beginning, but it's never going to be perfect. So I needed a way that was facilitating feedback from everybody else. And I wanted people to tell me quickly, I think you're missing the point here. But I needed to have a target for the finger. I needed to have something visible and not just a story to tell. So let's make my story clear. Let's make my understanding visible. Please help me with that. This was working very well, so we started practicing with the format in other scenarios, like requirement gathering, other types of workshops, and we got some feedback. We needed to make some adjustments. Some ideas were working really well, others weren't. But then we had a recipe, and then we started to play the recipe in different scenarios. Okay, well, now this is something which is really good. But it was not... this is my solution for my thing. This is just like a chef or a cook playing with ingredients at home, trying many different recipes. Half of them are going to go in the garbage and nobody would ever know about them. But sometimes putting 2 spices together are just making, oh, no, this is something that works. But you don't get interviewed for the thing that you put in the garbage. But still, you need that.
That's great. So, from the domain perspective, do we have any restrictions for the domain not to use event storming? I mean, for example, there is no need to apply event storming in this case, but it would be better to apply event storming for this type of domain. Does it directly depend from the complexity of the domain? Or is it okay for easy domains also apply event storming?
So let's say, so in the worst scenario, event storming is still harmless, and well, you can still try, and you might still get something out of it. But we had a scenario where we were playing with event storming, and then everybody was feeling like, yeah, goodish, but not groundbreaking. I was feeling the same. Like, no, we didn't find anything new. But this was giving me the insight about the real ingredient. And so this scenario was working with a company that was making overlays for video transmission on top of sport events. And sport events is a very deterministic domain. Like if you score the goal, well, then you are 1-0. So there was not so much ambiguity in that. And plus there was a lot of complex digital signal processing and design that was actually already happening. They knew the pipeline. It was a complex pipeline, but purely technical. So we completed the exploration and felt like, yeah, this is good. It's just more colorful than UML, but we didn't discover anything new. And I was, yes, that's actually the point. Like, I didn't know it before going in with that. That was coming from the very early days. But then I realized what's the real value with event storming. And event-driven design also, in fact. The thing is, if you have humans, more than one human being telling the story, you start seeing the value of event storming, because 2 people will tell 2 different versions of the story. In this case, half of the requirements were technical, so deterministic API specification, and the other part of the domain was very deterministic as well. no surprises, no ambiguity. It's not like, well, sometimes somebody scored a goal, but this is already managed in the field by the referee, so no ambiguity to discover. But if you have variations, it depends. Maybe even something like, it was actually shocking for me to discover that.
Okay.
Sometimes you have the law specifying a given behavior, but then you have different interpretation in different offices. And then if you didn't know about it, you thought the law was deterministic, but in practice, it's not. So whenever you have human beings telling the story, whenever you have a little bit of variations and or ambiguity, this is where even storming shines, because you're forcing 2, 3, 15 different storytelling perspectives to be coherent. And that might be painful, but it's extremely helpful if you need to write software. As a software person, we don't like ambiguity. We can't tolerate ambiguity. We need precise specifications. But business stakeholders, they might believe it, but they are not giving us specification. They are telling us something, stories. Even storming is bridging this gap. Like you give me storytelling, I can turn it into a deterministic model that I can eventually implement.
That's great explanation. I want to understand, as you know, nowadays, most people are working remotely and we are not in the same room. And we want to apply event storming. So is there any difference of applying event storming remotely using such tools, or is it always better to apply event storming in a same room? Everyone should be at the office and let's do event storming. Which one is better for you?
Well, the last question, I'm sorry, I'm out of focus. Trying to see if this gets better. Maybe.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just so the question was, the last question was really simple. Which one do you think is better, in person, hands off? Like if you have the possibility of doing it in the same room, there is no valid reason not to do it. Mm-hmm. But as you said, like many companies are now working remotely, so let's weigh the trade-offs. When it comes to discovery, when it comes to dealing with ambiguities, when it comes to deal also with the team politics, but maybe not even team politics, organization politics. Mm-hmm. Like you might find yourself in a place where you might be downstream to 2, maybe even 3 business stakeholders asking you to do something, and with conflicting needs. But if they don't see the conflict between the request, they might not realize that they're asking something that doesn't add up. So you need this format to make sure like your 3 stories don't make a concrete narrative. And this is where the workshop really helps. If you, but the great limitation for Discovery Workshop is that you can make the magic happen in 1 day only if you are in the same room, but it might take a lot longer if you are distributed. So normally the time needed for a remote exploration session is something like 3 half days. People get tired a lot more, and also they don't give you full attention. Like in the same room, we might put all the phones away, the laptops are away. I am talking with human beings in flesh and blood in the same room, solving a problem. Full focus, full immersion for the entire day. This full immersion is not possible remotely. It just takes one person being distracted, somebody picking up an email. So you just have half of the people brain most of the time, and you might get to the magic, but it takes a longer time. It takes a lot more effort, and maybe you're never gonna get to the place where, oh, now I can see everything. So actually, we just downscale the big picture, even storming a lot, to do it remotely, and actually suggest all the customers to, if you have a chance and if you need a large scale exploration, maybe we can wait for the day to happen, because making it happen slowly, incrementally, might not get where we want. It's just like it's a cost versus reward distribution, which is not as good. And when it comes to smaller models like process modeling and or software design, well, then the two approaches are a little bit more comparable. And it's just when we get into design, so yeah, software modeling and process modeling and software design, the approach is a little bit less facilitated, is a little bit more like a collaborative game. So we have rules and we can play our game a little bit slower, but in a way which is comparable. And it's not as engaging. It's not actually as fast as you can do with in-person version, but it's a reasonable trade-off. And just imagine playing, or maybe playing cards or playing a board game. You can do it remotely as well. It's just less fun. It's just like you like making your move, looking your team player or your opponent in the eye. It's just like this is the fun of playing a game together. We'll be missing that. So that's. But yeah, there are ways and tools like Miro, for example, improved a lot during the last years, and they are a decent support. It's not perfect, but it's doable. While big picture, we are still missing many things. So, well, let's do. Depending on the organization, an in-person workshop might still be preferable.
Cool. So thank you. Yeah, in-person is better than the remote one. But what if, let's say, we are doing in-person in a room? We have people with different background. So how can I be sure that this event storming will be effective? Like, I mean, we have different people with different technical background and can contribute effectively to the event storming process. Everyone.
Two things here. That's an interesting one. One. The active contribution of everybody was one of the reasons why the grammar was shaped this way. So in the past, I have been also a UML teacher. So and this is just to say that I know notations really well. And I used to be really, really precise and picky on formats like UML, BPMN, and other formats. But this was not necessarily an advantage. Like as a software person, sometimes the precision of the notation was just something needed to be able to, generate code out of the notation and so on. But this extra level of precision was actually a blocker for the contribution of the other people in the discussion. Like you remember that the white versus black diamond were aggregations versus composition. Why are they different? I mean, it was just noise in the discussion. It was not something to share with people. So my point was give up precision. Precision too early is actually a blocker for the contribution. Let's find the simplest possible notation, which is giving us a robust background for a conversation, but without being a blocker. So even the colors, they might be weird. So the orange is an event and the blue, what was that? The facilitator will make it visible and clear, but that's not a blocker. I mean, after a while, you start seeing pattern, just like blue and orange, blue, orange. And you maybe don't understand it, but it's not a blocker anymore. And the other part has to do with I actually don't care about the contribution. I mean, somebody might be silent. It is designed to remove the impediments, but then I don't know if everybody in the room, I mean, I don't know the people in many workshops. I don't know if anybody in the room is actually entitled or interested to speak. Like, I care about the problem that we are modeling. I care that building a model which is initially wrong and then gets corrected and enriched by everybody's contribution, it goes well. But at the same time, I might be vigilant for the quiet person in the corner of the room. So I might find a moment where everybody's busy doing something else. Like, is there anything preventing you from contributing? Is there anything I can do? You need to find this balance between the crowded moments or the quiet versus the active places, and or make yourself available in the empty space. So sometimes the best thing that you can do is stay in the room a little longer. Just say the workshop is over, I'm just staying here taking pictures and so on, and then you get an extra conversation after the workshop, because the person might be introverted, or maybe has something to say that could not be shared with everybody for weird reason, and so on. So I think being vigilant for the impediment is the most important thing. Even if, let's say, in the early days, I'm still making a lot of attention to these details, but sometimes people were not standing up and contributing. But the reason was not really deep, was just I already gave sticky notes and marker, and they were sitting at the table. So human beings are lazy, most of everything. Yeah. And this is the main driver when facilitating the workshop. If I don't have to stand up, why should I? So the result was everybody writing, and it looked like nothing was happening on the board. One of the things that flipped this dynamic was, I can have a little table right by the board with all the orange stickies are stacked up. So if as a facilitator, I told you to start writing, and you have to stand up to grab the sticky notes. Okay, now you have the marker and the sticky note, and you're in front of the surface. Now, being lazy, you shouldn't go back to the table. The lazy you would, okay, let's just stay here and put the sticky notes. So I'm designing around human beings' laziness. That's what I'm doing around the workshops. I'm looking at those little impediments.
That's a great point. Nowadays, we are actively using the event storming. Even I also actively using event storming in the context of domain-driven design. I want to understand why event storming started to complement domain-driven design.
Well, it was born in that space, and then it grew also somewhere else. So the reason why it was working so well with domain-driven design is because in domain-driven design, we care a lot about learning the complexity of the domain. But then the tools we were using for learning were not that good. Like the best we had was an interview or a conversation with the domain expert. And Derek Evans was really good in shaping and giving us hints about what to follow, the little clues that might be missing in this conversation. But still, there was something that was missing in terms of maybe possible inconsistencies between different voices. And then when we started practicing with all of this, not in a sequence. I'm talking with one expert and taking notes, then talking with another one and taking notes. This was actually creating a burden on the responsibility of the explorer, be it the business analyst, be it the software architect, whoever was running the requirements gathering. The moment you realize the story doesn't add up, then you have the responsibility to tell 2 or 3 of your bosses that your story doesn't add up. Then politically, that's really a big burden. These people might be your bosses, and you're the little human being telling them that they are wrong. Maybe they are not wrong. Their story might not be working on the same, let's call it platform, on the same model, whatever.
Yeah.
And this is tricky. The other thing that I think made it kind of a perfect fit was even storming was born on the wave of let's call it the second wave of domain-driven design. Okay. The one that was started basically by Greg Young and Nudi Dahan when they started playing with domain events and event sourcing and CQRS together and so on. And there was a big shift in the core concepts from aggregates, entities, and all of this stuff to, well, let's look at the events first. And events started to look really, really interesting because they were, on the architectural side, a very good way to decompose a system into independent, maybe bounded contexts or components and so on.
Yeah.
But at the same time, events were the building block for more robust storytelling. Even more, the moment we look into events, well, verb in the past tense means, well, there's a verb in there. And the verb conveys a lot more precision than the noun itself. The moment we start looking at the verbs, we realize that we have a dictionary, a ubiquitous language that might be a lot more precise than a language based mostly on nouns. So, and it also was something like a great party for me. We could also get rid of designing systems starting from the data model or a class diagram that was a data model in disguise. No, the system needs to have behaviors. Those behaviors needs to be supported by a data model. But those behaviors might actually be interconnected in a way which is different from the way data appears to be connected. So, and even storming was giving a lot of visibility to the fact that, okay, we are describing a very complex behavior, and we didn't use the word query or table at all. We didn't need data as a foundation to describe business behavior. Data was needed, clearly, but it was not the foundation we thought for many years.
That's great. That's great. So in terms of domain-driven design, we have ubiquitous language, bounded context, aggregates, value objects, entities, etc. So how deep can event storming go with domain-driven design? I mean, does it allow teams to identify only bounded context, aggregates, and entities, or can it also help identify value objects or other domain elements?
I think the most bounded context is probably the most relevant item that is supported by domain-driven, by event storming. Sorry. Running a big picture, you see people in action, you see emergent boundaries, you see swim lanes, you see responsibilities, you see people touching different areas, basically signaling this is my territory. Okay, so there's probably a boundary here, and this works really well. The other reason why bounded contexts are so important is that having the wrong boundaries is probably the most expensive and hard to reverse mistake you can do in software design. Everything else, well, you do a little bit of refactoring, you correct it, you can do it. But mixing two things, well, separating two things takes a lot more time. I usually talk about the Lego boxes as an example. Mixing two boxes takes a very short time. Separating all the bricks might take the entire afternoon. Try with 3 boxes, try with 4. We get into a different place. When it comes to defining with more precision the other building blocks, I think, I wouldn't use them for value objects, for example. That value object is something that becomes useful and visible when you play with the code. When you code and you feel boring by, why do I always have to do this? Why do I always have to care about it? Let's box this concept in a class and just reuse it correctly. But there's another thing that was not part of the original DDD Blue Book set of pattern, which I think is really, really powerful and probably underestimated. And it was a way we can think about policies in this way, which is in event storming a business decision that was that is a consequence of an event, and usually bridging the effect on another bounded context. The thing that was really interesting about this policy, which are the lilac sticky notes in my narrative, it just it forces the software designer to find a place for this decision. And this decision is actually a temporary agreement between the business. Like I like the lilac sticky notes. I call them the lie detectors because this is a specific place where the experts will give you different versions, or the version will change over time. Now, we used to apply a discount like this. Now the discount is different. We used not to allow these types of subscriptions. Now we do this as a bonus for this one. This is a place where words are temporary. This is a place where a software system needs a lot of flexibility, while the other building blocks, well, they are building blocks. Events are not going to change that frequently. Aggregates, once you have found a good shape, they are not going to change. Like, let's say, an item in catalog would not have a very complicated life cycle once you detected that one could be put on catalog, taken away or retired, better wording, or maybe suspended temporarily. But that's what you do. Oh, no, we also add promotion. No, that's a promotion bounded context, not a catalog. This aggregate is not going to change. But the glue between stuff, well, this is the thing that will change. And identifying this flexible part of the software, I think is very, very powerful. I mean, and this is one thing. The other thing which I really like is emphasizing the role of read models. Once again, a term that was not part of the original definition, was a term that was growing up, but in CQRS. But my definition for even storming, just like the implementation might be really open, is the information needed for a given decision. And this kind of flips the design. So there's a policy moment, or maybe there's an external user that is deciding whether to click a button or another one. Okay, what is this person looking at? What does this person need in order to decide what is the most relevant information? Well, in order to buy something, well, I need to know the price, the availability, but I'm also looking at the pictures and maybe the reviews. Okay, great. I need to put all of this in the same page so that this process is as fast as frictionless as possible. But how do we make this data available? Well, we are architects. We find a way. It's not exposing the data that we have, but detecting the data that we need. Then we are good enough to find a solution. But framing the read model in terms of needs, it shapes the language. So that I need to see a price. Oh, no, you need to see the current price. Well, maybe I just call it a price. I'm a customer. I don't care about the current price. Or I might need to care if it's very clear that the price is fluctuating, like on the stock market. But the language of the consumer is not the language of the producer. That might be creating friction or might provide clarification.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sounds fair enough. Yeah, that's cool. So let's wrap up the questions related to event storming with one last question. I want to hear from you the weaknesses or limitations of event storming.
Well, I think the biggest weakness is logistic. Like in a small session, well, you don't need to prepare it. You just invite people and you run it. But we lost this privilege the moment we turned the companies remote. So if you need to run a workshop, you always need planning. So event storming is not something that can happen. Oh, let's do an event storming. While it was possible a few years ago in many places, like, oh, looks like that's a great moment to run a small session. And this also means that sometimes you have to convince more people about something. There shouldn't be something to convince. So, okay, if let me rewrap it.
Yeah.
If you are a software architect, the tools you're using to design software, well, should be your concern. You're the expert. You got a degree in computer science, software engineering, whatever. And, well, I'm using the best tool for the job. But now, if event storming becomes a logistic activity where you have to book a room and maybe order plane tickets, well, you have to look for budget or permission for the travel and the booking and so on, and you need to justify something which is your job. And I would say that this is the biggest weakness here. Like we came from a place where, okay, let's just do it. I just need the paper roll and the stickies and the markers, which are heavier with me, zero impediments. Now it just became this. The second weakness has to do with this one, which is convincing before doing is still weak. And we actually, I'm spoiling another possible question that was in the list, but they are overlapping. So for many things, actually convincing somebody about doing it is one of the most wasteful activities ever. And it's just like you might be spending half an hour describing me some food, telling me how good this food is and describing me the recipe. Maybe with the ingredient I could figure it out. But if I never tried half of the ingredient, I would have no idea. And then we can spend another half an hour. Like, oh, you might send me pictures and things and telling me how good it is and reviews and so on. Or you can just give me something like, do you want to have a taste? It's great, fantastic. Never tried anything like this. So all of this talk before the action is waste. The way we try to overcome this, like, well, let's just do it first, maybe in a smaller version. If you like it, well, the potential is actually a lot higher. But convincing before the action might get you in a weird place. Like, oh, so yeah, you mean all the people in the same room, all of these sticky notes, and then what you do? We do this. The other person didn't do anything like that, has no experience to relate. And then you're describing something very, very unfamiliar. And maybe you're just asking them an act of faith in you. And, well, let's just do it. Let's just try to run the workshop with lower promises and expectations and see the way it goes. And then, oh, that was great. Well, can you also do it for designing larger system? Of course. But then you flip the table.
Yeah, exactly. I said that this was my last question, but I think I have a few more. So, say we are developing an application, and after 6-7 months, we realize that something is going wrong. We should rewrite it from scratch. And we should apply domain-driven design with event storming, etc. So I want to understand, how can I sell event storming to my company? How can I prove that event storming is a good tool? Let's use it.
I wouldn't. I really wouldn't. Let's say this is going to sound weird, but I am not good in selling event storming. And I really try not to convince anybody about this. I really shaped all my toolbox to do things without convincing. So if you, let's say you're working on an area and well, you feel like you need a big rewrite, but you know which is the area that is most painful, and then okay, let's try to see this area in a different way. But the investment you're asking for the rest of the team might just be maybe 2 hours. Let's try to see if we can see it in a different way, and without asking the commitment for a big workshop. But if in these 2 hours you discover that, we could have done it in this way instead, and this would have been removing this and this and this problem, okay, you have enough answer to raise the bar and try eventually to get some other sponsors on board. In general, there's a lot of domain-specific strategies. Like when I say domain, maybe context-specific strategies is actually better. Which means I might already have some people which are ideally on board. So in inviting a person to the workshop, and the person is already saying like, this is never going to work. Okay, you're going to be the last one to be invited, or maybe I need to offer you a special red carpet invitation or anything like this. Like, we really need you. We couldn't do anything without you. But you already have a little, the term was a blast radius, but I'm, trying to.
Not a big problem, yeah.
Yeah, anyway, just like you have some people that might already be on board and convinced, well, let's run a little workshop with only these people. Or don't even look for a workshop location or a place in the agenda. Like maybe you already have it. You might have a requirement grooming workshop, and just you run the same 2 hours with a different format. So people are already committed to 2 hours, and they might already be bored by the format because, it's 2 hours of requirement exploration. So if you say like, why don't we do this 2 hours today in a different way? I did my homework. I just prepared a board or a virtual board ready. Let's try to do it this way. But you're actually relieving them from giving you permission or... you're basically saying, like, if anything goes wrong, it's my fault. That's actually fine for most of the other people. And but if you get something different in this perspective, that would be great. Oh, that was better than the other format. Why don't we do it every time? Great. You didn't convince anybody. You just give them a taste. This little
first impression really matters. Yeah, exactly.
But there's a lot of flipping the table in this way. It's hard to explain without doing it.
Yeah,
and so let's do it. But
exactly.
don't put the burden of saying yes on a person that doesn't know. If you think like you want to run a workshop, just run it and make the time investment small enough.
Yeah, just show him how it works and what you are getting at the end, and I think they will be impressed. So that's great. So let's switch to the domain-driven design questions. I know that you're not just an expert on event storming, but also in domain-driven design. So I have a few questions regarding to domain-driven design. First of all, why do many companies still struggle with effectively implementing domain-driven design in their development processes?
Well, that's one of the questions where I don't have a good answer, honestly. Like,
what do you think? Just I don't need a strict definition of it.
Yeah, no, I've seen some impediments, but I think the main reason is they are trying to do something different without actually changing what needs to be changed. So there's, I would say, it's probably a variation on loss aversion bias. Like there's something that we have been doing as maybe software architects, application designer, whatever is the role, that was intended to be a good action, but was not leading us in the right direction. And for me, it was one of the things that I mentioned before, like designing starting from data was one thing that looked like the good thing to do in the past. That now to me looks like, oh no, that's a poison. It looks like good, but it will get your application bloated time over time. There was no advice in telling you where to stop doing something. But then you get into companies that repeated the same recipe maybe for 20 years, and then you might provide them a good running, lightweight prototype solving a lot of their problems. But this would mean accepting that, so you're saying that what we've been doing for 20 years is wrong. Well, no, I didn't. It might have looked like the right decision at that time. But now, after 15 years of business and growth and other choices, this is where you are with the bloated application and maintenance costs that skyrocketed. But the thing that was really interesting to me, it's not science anymore. It's not even politics. It's probably something. Well, sometimes it is politics, because if a given architectural choice was heavily sponsored by somebody who is still powerful inside the company, that is still a blocker. You cannot make your boss look stupid. This is not something that you can find in architecture books, but it's still one of the biggest drivers in the system. And then your decisions and your actions need to be a trade-off between what is logically viable and what is humanly viable or politically viable in this scenario. One thing is, I think there's a lot to be explored in this space. I found one book particularly interesting, and it was not a book about software. It's called Black Box Thinking, and it was exploring the process of experts having to deal with their own mistakes. And you can make mistakes. And what he was talking about surgeons with people killed in the surgery room. And they were not bad surgeons. Actually, they were really good. But in given circumstances, they did a mistake. And if we don't accept the fact that we could make mistakes, well, every architectural decision is going to look like a mistake over 10 years. It might look like very brilliant right now, given the context. Then the context vanishes away. Then you have a decision. You lost the idea of the context. Well, ADRs won't actually help here. But I think the whole notion of the software architecture is a set of good decisions. No, it's not. It's the combination of temporary, sometimes strategic choices, other times less strategic choices done over time in specific circumstances. And then you have to deal with the consequences. Not all of those decisions are good right now. Many were, but the presumption of being the person that always did the right thing, I guess that's our biggest blocker. Having a place and an architecture which is a lot more tolerant to mistakes, that's really good. Yeah. Putting up also with the culture, if somebody from the management says something like we cannot afford mistakes, then to me sounds like if you're doing software, it sounds like you're already bankrupt. You just don't know it yet. You will make mistakes. You need to be able to afford a limited number of mistakes. Then, of course, your software team is not going to waste money on dumb mistakes. It's going to learn as much as possible and make sensible choices to not to waste this budget of mistakes. But also, you might get in a place where, okay, these two architectural choices seem both good. Maybe let's try both for a couple of weeks and see which one is more tolerant to this stressor or to this other one. But I guess it's a lot more of a cultural thing, which is under the hood, and that domain-driven design is revolutionizing a little. You're trying to follow the prescription without changing the way you did things.
Exactly. Exactly. I have a real case for you as a software architect. So, say we have an application written around 14, 15 years ago with monolith with a classical layered stuff. And after 14, 15 years, someone came to the company and realized that this is just the, say, bullshit, the big ball of mud, and we need to rewrite it from scratch using domain-driven design, clean architecture, etc. So in a team, other developers don't know domain-driven design. As a software architect, what's your advice? Where should we start? First, should we start to teach them domain-driven design? Because domain-driven design is not just about teaching. It is completely different mindset. So what is your advice for this, Tim?
Well, to be honest, the best experience in teaching domain-driven design to a team, we didn't mention the word domain-driven design for a while. So we had two ingredients.
Okay.
We had the team before this was actually firefighting, working on 42 different components. So really, really messy scenario. But then we had a clear case, somebody was asking a new functionality that looked like an independent, coherent whole, and okay, this looks like a good thing to start working as a team. It was a team of four people. And then one of the guys was, oh, so we're gonna do domain-driven design here? Well, no, we're just trying to write good code here,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually did one thing,
Okay.
I was protecting the boundaries a little, saying something like, I don't want to blend in with this external model. We need a clear anti-corruption layer. We need a clean separation between our bubble and everything else. So that was my guidance on not making hard to reverse mistakes, like mixing two bounded contexts, and worked pretty well, okay. And the second thing was my approach was I'm not giving you any solution until you tell me that you have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the story ended up like this. The first problem they face, we were trying to do test-driven development to make robust code, and say well, test-driven development, it's a pain because our tests are, always failing for random reason. No, doesn't sound like right. Let me look at it. Oh, well, you managing the transaction in the repository. No, you should have it in the application layer, and the repository should be passive. And then the other part of this was also the database was shared with another team. So first, the database is yours. Oh, but still my tests are making it brittle for the other one. Or because your tests are all integration tests that go to the database. Now, you put a lot of testing at TDD level in the domain, but you make sure that the separation between the domain and the database is just a technical detail. The moment you can persist this, and the moment that this entity aggregate, we didn't call them in this way yet, the moment this set of classes is well structured, they should be persistent. You shouldn't have surprises in this area. Oh, okay, that is getting better. 1 week later, but now we are writing a lot of tests. We're spending a lot of time in re-changing the test and the classes. Let me look at it. Oh, empty constructor plus setter. What? Take this crap away. Let's put a robust constructor, maybe a factory method if we need to give a significant name to it. But this makes sure that your classes can only be created in a way that makes them robust, and you have everything you need to complete this. And this, by the way, is called the factory pattern in domain-driven design. 1 week later, we found the need for value objects. We just we're wasting a lot of time for this. What if you do this and this and this instead? So the thing that was really good was we were learning by mistakes. We didn't know domain-driven design as a set of prescriptive rules to be good in DDD land. we
Okay.
learned a set of practices that was making our software better, and we were also able to detect the smell and the noise of bad code.
Mm.
So we were learning what happens if you don't apply this.
Mm.
And
While
after 4 weeks, by the way, this has a name, this has a name, and this has a name, and I have to admit I kind of forgot some of the pains and smells because I never had them in the 5 7 years before, because I was following those practices, and some smells were never happening. Oh, well, I remember that. That was in the very early project when I was doing this. No, don't do this. Don't do this.
got it.
But knowing your mistakes, it gives you strength. It gives you option. And sometimes it's not even black and white. Sometimes it's, if you do this in this way, it's better. It just solves this problem. But in a different context, well, this problem might be totally acceptable and your solution might not be. So we ended up with a team of very, very good developers, and but without mentioning domain-driven design for the first weeks. And
No.
the other thing that was really instrumental was protecting the boundaries.
Okay.
Gave us a safe space to learn and to make mistakes. So we could make mistakes, we could fail. Our code was not right at first attempt, but our mistakes were not hitting the rest of the company. So we were actually growing at a faster speed because we were, actually relieved from the burden of doing everything perfectly. Our code turned out to be really, really good, but it didn't start as such. It started as, well, just code, or then better code, then even better code, and oh, no, this is good code. And but it didn't start like that.
Yeah, definitely. But it will take, I think, a lot of time rather than directly explaining a domain-driven design to the developers. What do you think about it? Maybe you can achieve it in 1 year, but having a solid, I don't know, lectures, sessions about domain-driven design will help you to reach to the destination a bit faster.
I actually don't think so. I think you need. In this case, that was a recipe we adopted, like having a good on-site mentorship, somebody who had options, and the growing, the learning curve was actually really short.
No.
It was just pull instead of push. Oh, we have this problem. Okay, a solution might be looking like this and this and this. And by the way, this is called the factory pattern, or this is called the value object. And while the thing that might happen is, if you go the other way around, is that you have developers following the prescription without understanding the reason why. And well, to be even more honest, some of the ugliest code I've seen in my life was actually somebody telling me, I was reading your blog post and I was doing exactly what you said. And I was, no, this is not what I said. But this colleague was getting a bit of advice from the blog post. There was a lot of implicit stuff, like my starting context was different from his starting context. He was mapping it, and then it turned out completely unmanageable, and there was no safety check, like this cannot be true. Like in my example, there were only let's say 2 or 3 parameters. In his code, there were something like 30, and well, it felt like the same thing, but I would never have a code, a constructor with 30 parameters, for example. Like, there is no business situation that makes it viable. And I think being able to feel the pain, recognize the pain, and find a solution actually turn out making really good developers. Like we started with I would call it, I think they were an underdog team at the time we started, and then turned out a very, very good team just because we had the chance to practice and to do things right. And also, don't underestimate the safety. Okay. We are learners, and every day is a good day to make a little experiment. But if we are afraid, we don't do it. And then tomorrow we do it the same. And then after 1 year, we realized that we had 365 opportunities to make an experiment, and we didn't catch anyone. And that's it. If you see code in a different way, well, just take a couple of hours and see how this different intuition might lead you. And you need to feel safe for doing it. If you are afraid of breaking everything, then you will go home sleeping. Oh, there might be a better way. Then you don't apply. The net result for you and the company is we did nothing special.
Exactly. So in terms of domain-driven design, do you see domain-driven design as a silver bullet in modern software development?
Not really. I mean, the term silver bullet is scaring me like hell. I think so. And there's also a lot more marketing about domain-driven design. So let me reframe it a little. I started dealing with domain-driven design actually 20 years ago. 2004, 2005 was when the book came out. I bought it fresh and I started getting into that. And one of the things that kept domain-driven design good was there was not so much marketing, not so much vendor hype, not so many DDD products, just a set of techniques, approaches, attitudes that actually turn out to be working. Now I see this a little bit endangered because many more people are talking about domain-driven design. This is good, but this is also kind of dangerous because I can find many blog posts or stuff saying well, DDD says this or says no, it doesn't. But the core gets blurred in some way. And but still, there are some practices and ideas which were unique to domain-driven design, like the focus on the language and the idea of bounded context, like independent models. I think this is really, really good and the foundation for any large-scale complex software. I mean, you couldn't write software without those approaches, but then the code is going to be harder to maintain, and it's kind of proven. So you might not need the whole DDD stack. You might not need the blue book architecture or red book approach, or you might not need CQRS event sourcing in every place. But the focus on the learning and the conceptual building blocks for domain-driven design, I think they're really, really useful in many contexts, at least for business software. If you're writing different types of software like drivers or maybe games, even if some games are using something like DDD, well, then it might be different. For business software, still, I haven't found anything better.
Great. So, in terms of modern software development, are you happy with modern software development techniques?
Wow. Sorry. Yeah, I will. Yeah, you see gray beard here, and I would probably look like modern software development techniques. It might mean many things. One thing that struck me when he dropped me this question was there are very diverging tendencies. So one of the most interesting things that happened in the last years about modern software development techniques, I think has to do with what was called mob programming and then ensemble programming, which was in a way the evolution of pair programming, like the entire development team is coding as one man. So many people talking, only one person typing on the keyboard, well, with possible switch. But the team is coding as only one person. And at the same time, and this is actually not a ritual, it's something which is very, very efficient in terms of getting ownership on the code by the entire team. You don't rewrite code that much because you wrote it a lot better in the first approach.
Yeah.
The opposite direction is fueled by AI. So that you get a lot of AI support in IDEs or outside IDEs, which are basically helping and giving you a lot more speed in writing software. And but this is partially an illusion, because writing software has never been the bottleneck in software development in the recent years. It used to be the bottleneck when writing software was typing in very, very complicated languages. But now the bottleneck is understanding the code, not in typing. And now we have yet another tool which is helping us writing software faster. Maybe we are just, if you use it this way, we are just accumulating technical debt faster. Like if you look at the numbers about how much time is spent writing code, how much time is spent maintaining code, okay, we are optimizing code writing, fantastic. We might be doubling the time needed for rewriting, maintaining, understanding code, because now the code is not written by us, but written by a supreme entity somewhere else, which has some advantages, like you can refactor somebody else's code, no feelings attached. But at the same time, you're just building harder to understand code a little faster. So I don't think code writing is the place where AI is giving the real advantage. Some of the advantages might be an illusion. The areas that might be really interesting are the places where AI might help maybe in understanding legacy code, or transforming it without all the activities which are needed in legacy refactoring. It can actually give us a lot of extra opportunities in taking ownership of legacy code bases which are already not readable. Then, okay, this is a place where we could do something different. But it was actually really striking for me, like somebody's going in a direction like, oh, we can write software faster. That was never the problem. And it might actually be more effective to go ensemble programming, but in the software development space is so wide that you can find very, very opposite narrative, and both claiming to be successful.
Great. In terms of AI, what do you think where we are going with AI? So I have Copilot, I have ChatGPT, as you mentioned. I'm now going to be a prompt engineer rather than software engineer. So is it the future of software development, or it is just, as you mentioned, some sort of illusion?
I would say that the ecosystem is so wide that once again, every interpretation could be true and successful, because it's a market thing. So there is and there will be a market for fast developed application written with leveraging AI support. And other companies might also realize that, oh, now you have a code base written by a prompt engineer, and then you don't know how to play with this code. Maybe rebuilding it from scratch might be faster than refactoring. That's a possibility. But I think the whole landscape as a whole is a very incoherent system. There's somebody boosting investment in an area, claiming stuff which is appealing to the wrong professionals. So you might have, let's say, some board members saying like, why am I wasting all this money on software development? And maybe stop hiring software developers. Like, well, Salesforce has been doing something like this recently. Too early to say. And then even if it looks like the right thing to do, maybe there might be very, very weird reasons. I would say we might look at our ecosystem in this area, like make experiment, find out if the tools are actually helping you, because AI is really good for some task or for entering in an area where you have limited knowledge. Bootstrapping, well, maybe adapters or things like this. It's absolutely amazing. It just saves reading a lot of documentation. But, well, prototyping is not maintaining an application. Like if your responsibility is on the line for keeping something in production, maybe you need a little bit more ownership than just ChatGPT said so. If you get sued for breaching some rights or something like this, well, maybe you need to know. You still need somebody with ownership. So I think the system will be fluctuating a lot around this area, and we are in a peak of a given hype. Let's see what's going to happen in a couple of years.
I'm also
in the meanwhile, we are curious, we are explorers. Let's experiment as much as we can and try different recipe. Something is going to stick, something is going to work, something is going to look like a big illusion. Too early to say which one. Or maybe for me, somebody might already be spotted that.
My YouTube subscribers always asking to ask question about AI. The main question is, will AI replace software engineers? This is the top number one question the subscribers asking. So,
I mean, not in the DDD space. So what LLMs are doing? They are just working on plausible results.
Okay.
And this means, given the same format of information, the same set of information put in written form so that they can be digested. And this is already an action that might lose some nuances, like, well, there is no body language in a speech-to-text translation, while human beings can interpret body language. But you lose some details, and then you will try to, according to the common wisdom, build a model or something according to this limited set of information. But AIs are not going for brilliance. They are going for plausibility. Yeah. And plausible is exactly what built the monolith in the how to maintain monolith in the past. Like, oh, that seemed like a plausible solution. And so I would say there is not enough data to train an AI to do the right thing, but there's abundance of data to have an AI repeat exactly the past mistakes. So if you can deliver above the average, I think you should be safe. But if you're just moving in the pack, well, then, the pack could be replaced.
Yeah,
that's
great answer.
That's my reading of the situation.
Exactly, great answer. And the last topic, let's talk about collaborative modeling. What are the initial? Let's first talk about the exact collaborative modeling term. What is collaborative modeling?
Well, that's kind of something that didn't have a real name, and it was just in the air. I mean, for me, it was a side effect of having the chance of collaborating with Eric Evans a while ago, a few years ago, and but this made me realize that the moment you have two modelers, two person with a problem and the shared surface, you're entering a different space. It's something like it could be something like a chess match, or you have two brains, one problem to solve, and one surface. That's the main ingredient for collaborative modeling. Well, then you can have more than two persons, 3, 5, 20, and then it became actually really interesting for me, and that's one of the spaces where I'm exploring mostly. What is the best format to have these people find an obvious solution for their problem? Okay. So it's for me became a space where we can have overlapping influences from design in terms of not exactly user experience, but visual design. What is the way to make this information visible? I do a lot of thinking between what is the primary information? Okay, let's use this and give this thing this shape and this color, and then what is the other source of information? Or maybe we need a different color or a different shape. Let's make it readable and so on. But it's a place where you can have influence from visual design, from the actual discipline. Might be software architecture, but also might be business like budgeting or planning, and then looking for the perfect model, making the strategy, the key decision you're looking for, obvious. And I love it because there are so many places that don't have a format, or where you can actually play with the format and move them in a completely different direction.
That's great. So, do we have some initial requirements for successfully implementing collaborative modeling, or you don't need any requisites?
Yeah, that was the first time I read it. I thought no, this answer is no. You just need 2 people and maybe 2 markers and a whiteboard or a shared surface. That's all you need.
Okay.
Then I realized this was the old me thinking about a co-located company where this session were actually easy. Now, this is one of the problems of remote companies. The switch from a conversation like the one we're having on a video conference call. I see you, you see me, but we don't have a shared modeling surface. We don't have a whiteboard. Okay, we might go to Miro, but we need to both be registered to Miro. We need to create a table. We need to maybe agree on the format, or maybe it should be better if the format is already prepared. So the requirements for getting into a shared modeling space in a remote organization are actually growing. You need to provide access, and maybe we also need to have a larger screen. I have a very large screen now in front of me. I am, you see me moving. I am having a stand-up desk, and I'm actually moving and see many information, but I have no idea what is the information you're seeing. Because if the person on the other side has a smaller screen, what is clear right in front of my face might not be so visible to the other person. So there are some extra requirements for collaborative modeling if this is performed remotely. We might say, it should be fair. Everybody should have a decent screen size, the ability to see, to share information and so on. But the response speed, the feedback loops are a lot longer. And this, I think, if you consider collaborative modeling a good weapon for problem solving, okay, we are watering it down a little, because if you have the chance of being in the same room, okay, let's do it on a whiteboard. it didn't need planning. It didn't need preparation. It just, you had the whiteboard, you grab a marker and you start writing down a diagram. That was the most natural form of collaborative modeling. And it might only be 5 minutes, and then you go back coding, because now you see solution is there on the flip chart. So I think we are discovering that collaborative modeling is more powerful, but we are losing the ability of using it every time we want.
That's a big example. So, dear Alberto, thank you very much. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Sorry for laughing.
Yeah, that's completely okay. I really enjoyed and learned a lot. I was thinking a bit different related to collaborative modeling, and also my point of view of event storming, I think, changed a bit. By the way, I really love event storming, and I'm always trying to apply it wherever possible. So this is a really cool tool. Thank you very much for this. So I hope in the future we'll have another session with you, maybe to deep dive into details of event storming, collaborative modeling, or domain-driven design, or even software design, because this was the general session. We tried to cover everything in one session. So now it is not possible to cover every aspect of all these topics in one session. But I hope, if you promise for the second session with us, I would be really happy to have it with you. So
let's see. Well, you have an audience, let's if you get a good response, well, we can think of having another one.
Yeah, definitely.
If we don't, well, that's.
I'm 100% sure that I will get really good feedback. So thank you very much, dear Alberto. It was my pleasure to host you, and thanks for everything. Have a nice day.
My pleasure, and thanks everybody for the patience.
Thank you very much. Bye. Bye.
Cheers.